Today's lesson deals with solving triangles. Solving is a little more work than what we did yesterday, but it's just basically putting together all the concepts we learned from yesterday. So what does it mean to solve? We need to write this little note out to ourselves. Solving means find all parts of a triangle. Find all the parts. That means you can tell me every part about that triangle. That means all its sides and all its angles. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to end up putting all of our measurements in a little chart. That way it's easy to see them. You can compare your answers with other people too. First off, let's think back to what we did yesterday. When you saw a problem, and they were just like this yesterday, and you're trying to solve for an angle and you know two sides, what was our little procedure for finding that angle? Well, you're supposed to mark the angle. It's marked. Good. Label your sides. How do I label this side? Hypotenuse. And that's our adjacent. How do I know it's adjacent? Because it's right next to the angle. How do I know it's hypotenuse? It's across from the 90-degree angle. It's the longest side. Now you need to think to yourself, which trig involves A and H? Adjacent and hypotenuse. Cosine. However, you're supposed to remember to find angles you must use the inverse. And if you haven't studied that, you need to study that now. To find angles, you must use the inverse. That's a good phrase to write out to the side to study. So you're going to type in cosine inverse of a fraction dealing with these two numbers. Remember, it's adjacent, which is 24, over hypotenuse, which is 52. You type that in your calculator, round it to the nearest degree, 63, and that's approximately 63 degrees. If you round, it's approximately equal to. So now I can write that little angle in there. So remember, solving, though, means finding all parts. Right now, do we know all the parts on this triangle? No. We're missing another angle, and we're missing another side. You can pick to solve for either one of those at this moment, because either one of those should be doable. To me, the easy one to solve for, if you know two angles, find the missing angle. So that angle right there I can solve for. How can I solve for the third angle? Okay, so I can do 180 minus 63 minus 90. And what do I get? 27. That angle's 27. I only have one other piece I need to find. Side. How do you find the missing side on a right triangle? Pythagorean theorem. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared. That's the formula you should remember. Remember, we use CAB, not a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's just more versatile. Which piece goes in for c? 52 goes in for that because it's the largest and it's the hypotenuse. And then the other ones can be 24 squared plus, we'll call it b squared. Yes, we'll keep it b squared. So that's something you should be able to solve pretty easily now. All right, so when everybody solved for that b, they got b is approximately 46. And I'll be okay with rounding to the nearest whole number. That way it'll fit in our chart nicely. Make sure you can round properly. So I've been mentioning this chart for a while now. Here's what I want you to make your chart look like. I want you to list out your angles and your sides. So put your angles in order from least to greatest. What's our smallest angle? Okay, we have these three angles. 27 is our smallest, then 63, and then 90. So making it logical by putting them in order. And then we'll do our sides, smallest to greatest. 24, 46, 52. There's our little chart with our angles and sides. All right, now we can practice one more. Let's try number 3 this time. Number 3, once again, you know two sides and you're missing an angle. What's the process? We mark our angle. We label our sides. How do I label the 17? Adjacent. How do I label the 27? Hypotenuse. I know it's hypotenuse, it's across from the right angle. I know it's adjacent because it's beside the angle. When you solve for angles, you use inverse. Write that word real big on your paper. You better not forget it. We have to use the inverse this time. What do you know? It's adjacent and hypotenuse again. That should be familiar. That's cosine, and you have to use the inverse to find angles. And what do we get as a rounded answer? Say it. 51. Good job. Do we all agree? Great. Now, what did I do earlier after I found that one angle? I wrote it in, and then what did I do? I found the other angle. So I'm going to find this angle by subtracting these other from 180. So 180 minus 90 minus 51. And what do we get? Yeah, 39 degrees. What was the other thing that I did earlier? Do I have all my parts right now? No, I need one other piece. What other piece do I need? That long leg. So that's over here. How do I find the missing side on a right triangle? Pythagorean theorem, CAB. So what's my c-squared term? 27, the longest. It's crossing the right angle. Equals a squared plus b squared. So we'll say 17 squared plus b squared. All right, we solve for b by subtracting these values from each other and square rooting that answer, and we get b is approximately 21. Final thing we need to do is put our answer in that little box so we can examine them easier. So angles and sides. Angles in order would be 39, 51, 90. Sides are going to be 17, 21, and then 27. There are our angles and our sides in a nice box. We can find our answers easily, and it's in a logical order. Now we're going to look at number 5. Number 9 changes things up. It gives us different information. So this is another case you're going to have to learn how to deal with. But the thing is, you did this problem yesterday. Now we're just adding to it. Yesterday, when we had a problem like this, what was our first step? Mark the angle. Oops. One more time. Mark the angle. After we mark the angle, what do we do? Label your sides. So what's this one? Adjacent. What's this one? Opposite. How do I know it's opposite? It's across from the angle. That's adjacent. That's hypotenuse. Pretty straightforward from there. After that, you need to remember what trig ratio deals with adjacent and opposite? Tangent. So do we need to use the inverse this time? Are we trying to solve for an angle right now? We're not trying to find an angle right now. We're just finding a side. So we don't need the inverse unless we're finding an angle. Right now we don't need to find an angle, so we don't need the inverse. So we say tangent of an angle since we know the angle. And now we can do our fraction over here on the right. Remember, it's opposite over adjacent for tangent. Now yesterday, we did some rounding. We took tangent 26 and we rounded to 4 places. Today I want to see if you can do it without rounding like that. Let's see. You're supposed to remember it's over 1 and we cross multiply. So that'll end up being 13 times 1 is 13. Tan 26 times x. So here's how you need to write it. Tan of 26 times x. Now, we've done a lot of math problems like this before. Sorry, I meant 28 on these. 28. divide by tan 28 to get x alone. So you're going to learn that this lessens the amount of times you round your answers. So tan 28. So all you need to do is realize x is going to be 13 divided by tan 28. Type that in. And we find out that x is approximately 24. So this is a little different than yesterday, but it's more accurate. It's more accurate when you can actually divide by that trig ratio or multiply by that trig ratio. Right now we just found the x value. We also need to find this side and this angle. So we have free choice on which one we want to do. Which one do you think is easier, finding an angle or finding a side? I think the angle is easier. This angle is pretty easy because you already know two of the angles. Remember, all you need to do is 180 minus 90 minus 28. There's a shortcut. You could just do 90 minus 28. And what do you get? 62. So that angle's 62. What's the other part I need to do? Find your missing side, which is a hypotenuse. How do we find a missing side again? Cab. Okay, so c squared equals a squared plus b squared. So our c term is our unknown this time. And then our a and b, we do know those. We have a 13 squared and a 24 squared. Now, since we're using this rounded 24, our c is not going to be perfect. However, it's just seeing, can you do this process and find all the missing sides? So let's see what we get for our c squared term. All right, I'm hearing that we get c is approximately 27. We done? No, what do we need to do? Write that in a little chart. That way it's nice and neat. I got to write mine kind of funny over here. We'll have angles, we'll have sides. It's going to be nice and organized though. Smallest angle, what is it? 28. Next biggest would be 62 and then 90. It's our smallest side. Looks like 13, 24, and then 27. Those are our nice answers. Now let's do number 7 to get one more practice of this. Number 7, I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. We're missing a side, an angle, and another side. Right now, this is just like we did yesterday, so we're going to solve for x first. To solve for x, we need to know that this is the angle we're looking at, and we need to label our sides from there. We have our opposite. This is right next to it. This is adjacent, not our hypotenuse. Opposite and adjacent, what's that? Tangent. Do we need to use inverse? No, because we're not solving for angles right now. We're solving for a side. So we do the regular angle that it gives us, which is 42. And then we write our little ratio over here for tangent. Tangent ratio is opposite over adjacent, so that's 14 over x. Remember, we can put this over 1 and cross multiply. It's just like the last one. 14 times 1 is 14. Tan 42 times x. And how do we get x alone? Divide by tan 42. That way they'll cancel, and we'll get x is approximately 16 is what I've heard. So that's just like yesterday. You shouldn't have problems with that. Now it's just adding a little bit to it. We found x is 16. We can write that in. What else do we need to do? Finding missing side, finding missing angle. Earlier you told me that finding that missing angle was easy. So that's 180 minus 90 minus 42. Remember, there is a shortcut, 90 minus 42, and you get, what do you say? You should be able to do that in your head, guys. 48, good. Now we got to find that missing side. find that missing side on a right triangle. What do you need to do? Cab. Okay, what's our C term? We've already done X, so just leave it as C. That's fine. We'll have an A term and a B term. We'll say 14 squared and 16 squared. And solve for C. Give me that approximation. And I heard 21. Final thing you need to do, list out your angled sides. Angles are going to be 42, 48, 90. Sides are going to be 14, 16, and 21. Good to go.